So good morning everyone. We are here to discuss the lesson 2, which is the global demography. The learning objective at the end of this lesson, students are expected to explain the theory of demographic transition as it affects global population.
Okay, so proceed sa demography. Uh, Demography is literally translated from the Greek. Demography means description of the people. And one definition among many, demography is the scientific or statistical study of the human population, and it studies the size, territorial distribution, composition of population changes therein, and the components of such changes, which may be identified as natality, mortality, territorial movement, which is what we call migration, and the social mobility, which is the changes of status. Another term for the demography, it is the study of population processes, and this processes is what we call the big three, which is the birth. Una na siya ang natality, ang sa birth rate, ang migration, ang aging, which includes deaths. So, all these processes contribute to changes in populations, including how people inhabit the earth, from nations and societies, and develop culture. And when it comes to populations, its meaning to demography is it is the collection of persons alive at a specified point in time who met certain criteria. For example, is population sa Philippines adtong 2019 sa November 2. So, another example po is population sa America adtong 1958 adtong April to nga na di bali kandak na sila study pila na sila kabok adto nga tawo adto nga time impila dito ang pilay namatay, pilay nagpuyo ingana. So na ay video which we prepared for para masabtan pagyud ang demography. So pay Gora.
Hey, you look like a handsome young guy who wants to know what demography is all about.
Yes, actually, I would.
Great. Now let's get started. Demographic change concerns everyone. No matter what age, gender, or where he or she comes from. How a society is shaped and what effects it has on the future are big questions within demographic work. Demographic change can mean many things, from aging in society to you starting a family. But let's look at the bigger picture. Did you know that just by being alive means that you are a part of society? In order to understand how you fit into this societal equation, it is important to know what that means for you personally and globally. So, to have a great impact, it starts with being aware of your surroundings. Ultimately, you are the ones who affect demography now and in the future.
That's nice to know, but why should I be interested in my role and participation in society?
Well, it's because the young population is most affected from changes in the society. It's your future we're talking about. But demography is not just about the bigger picture. It has many parts to it. And to get in touch with these topics, you can now download the app, A Life Journey. The app can be downloaded for free from the App Store for use on your iPhone or iPad. It's easy to use and understand so that the young and old can learn together.
Okay, so in demography, naatay gitawag nga demographic transition theory, which is the most prominent explanation for population growth, and it is also known as the classic demographic transition or The first demographic transition. It is the changes in the size of the world's population over a certain period of time. Demographic transition theory is used to describe and explain the movement of birth rates, death rates, and population growth. And this theory suggests that every country passes through three different stages of population growth. And sa demographic transition theory na ay tulo ka stages, and these stages will be further explained by Clark.
So, in the first stage of the demographic transition, due to the ignorance and being illiterate of the people in any birth control, both birth rates and death rates are high. People also rely on their main job, which is agriculture based, and also the transport, commerce, banking, and insurance are underdeveloped, and people only get low income, which may and may not be enough to feed the whole family. And in the second stage, it is experiencing a phase of economic growth. Agricultural and industrial productivity increases, and also the introduction of education and modern medicine lowers death rates, especially among the children, and while birth rate is almost stable. And in the third stage, birth rates gradually decrease, and it is usually a result of improved economic conditions, education, and access to contraception or birth um, family planning. And the standards of their living improves, which results to a growing income. And population also still continues, but in a lower rate.
The Malthusian theory of population. The Malthusian theory of population. It is the theory of exponential population and arithmetic food supply growth. Before that, an English cleric and scholar named Thomas Robert Malthus na siya ang ga-publish of ang theory in his 1798 were writing entitled An Essay on the Principle of Population. Furthermore, he theorized the population was increased in geometric progression, while food production also increases arithmetic progression. In order to know about those progressions, it was stated in the book that um, geometric progress is the sequence of numbers where each term after the first is found by multiplying the previous one by a fixed number, a non-zero number called the common ratio. So for example, in a sequence of 2, 10, 50, 250, and 1250, which is the result of the common ratio is 5. So, and another one, an arithmetic progression, it is also a sequence of numbers such that the difference between the consecutive terms is constant. So, for example, Japol kay ang sequence ani kay 2, 5, 8, 11, 14, and 17, which is the result of the common difference of 3. To conclude ni Malthus na mudyo siya sa law of diminishing returns, namulid siya sa shortage sa food. Kay iyang resulta padulong siya sa preventative checks and positive checks that the population will be controlled to balance the food supply with the population level. Next slide, please. So those are the positive checks and preventative checks. So now we have two population checks of Malthus after he concluded the law of diminishing returns na malicious sa food shortage. So these checks are positive checks or natural checks and preventative checks. To begin with, if to begin with, positive checks or natural checks is any event or circumstance that shortens a human life. To understand this, positive checks na mulid siya sa or to increase the death rate by is control the population such as hunger, misery, plague, and war. Since um, since preventative checks had not limited the number of poor people. Malthus mentioned that kung ang positive checks were not successful, a famine would inevitably occur to reduce the population that he supposed that natural forces will correct the disparity between food supply and population growth in the form of natural disasters such as floods and earthquakes, and man-made actions such as conflicts and starvations. While preventative checks are the way in which nature can alter changes in the population. It means this kind of check na may reduce siya sa birth rate from control the population. It's because it was mentioned in the slide na in which nature can alter changes in the population such as moral restraint or known as postponing marriage or and immoral ways or birth control. So Malthus stated in the book that to correct imbalance, Malthus suggested using preventive methods to regulate the growth of the population. These processes include family planning, late marriages, and celibacy. Before we proceed to the next slide, let us watch the video for more understanding about Malthusian theory of population.
Back in 1804, there were roughly 1 billion people on this planet. Today, just a little over 200 years later, there are over 7.5 billion of us. Also, roughly 80% of our energy comes from fossil fuels. Oh, and all it took was 40 years for our water use to quadruple. It's also worth mentioning that we depend on just 12 plants and 5 animal species for 75% of our food, and these are just 4 examples of facts one can consider worrisome. One of the most vocal personalities when it comes to worrying about population growth was Thomas Malthus, who believed that population growth can be exponential, whereas food supply growth is arithmetic at best. Progress in fields such as agriculture, however, ended up proving him wrong. There are still thought currents such as neo-Malthusianism, which revolve around the idea that if population growth gets out of hand, humanity will deal with issues such as resource depletion, pollution, making the world inhospitable, and so on. On the one hand, Malthusian concerns aren't 100% unfounded because 1. Human progress didn't come without price tags, for example pollution. 2. Past performance doesn't guarantee future results, or just because these scenarios haven't manifested themselves thus far, it doesn't mean it can never happen. However, critics do tend to hold the upper hand because 1. Technological advances make it clear that humans are a creative bunch. 2. Birth control is definitely mainstream these days. 3. History has, so far, proven Malthusian thinkers wrong. Even if this doesn't guarantee anything about the future, it's an argument that counts quite a bit. 4. People aren't just resource consumers. Having a higher population also means having more producers, innovators, and so on. All in all, while Malthusian thinking may not be the most compelling approach, we shouldn't blindly dismiss everything that has to do with it.
So, the next one is criticism of Malthusian theory of population. The first one we have population growth, and the second one we have food production. For the third, we have global trade, and for fourth, we have calculations. So, for population growth, populations have grown and food manufacturers had risen because of technological developments. So, thanks to technological developments, as mentioned, food manufacture has risen and population has grown. Now, let's go to the second one, which is food production. And food production, it says due to technological innovations, food production has dramatically improved. It is also said that Matthew stated that populations increased in a geometric progression while food production increased in an arithmetic progression. And as a result, population grew faster than food production and tended to outstrip in a short time. Next one will be global trade. For global trade, food production restriction was largely grounded on the inadequate availability of land. So back then, the limited amount of land at the time was Matthew's theory of food production. However, thanks to globalization, trading goods and services for food is possible, which increases the amount of food a country can consume. And for the last one, we have calculations. For the calculations, growth rates are not consistent in the theory. And that's because it turns out that Matthews did not put the calculations for the geometric growth of the population and the arithmetic growth of food. So this is why it says that growth rates are not consistent in these theory. That's it. Thank you.
Now let us proceed to the effects of global population. It can increase both internal and external conflicts. Rapid growth of populations in the poorest countries that hinders economic development. Continued poverty threatens global political stability. Also, more consumption of resources and more waste products to nature. So, um, so what does we mean by the internal and external conflicts? Internal conflicts refer to the conflicts occurring within a specific country. Examples are religious conflicts, political conflicts, societal conflicts, moral conflicts, and more. On the other hand, external conflicts are the conflicts outside or beyond the control of one country. Examples are global trade, global relationships between countries, and more. So how do these conflicts increase? As populations grow larger, younger, and more urban, the more complex the minds of the people are. More variables, more complications. Thus, this causes the conflicts among individuals and countries. Second, rapid growth of population in the poorest countries. It hinders economic development that condemns children in poor countries to continue in poverty, which also threatens global political stability. As we all know, poverty refers to the lack of income and productive resources to ensure sustainable livelihoods. It includes hunger and malnutrition, limited access to education and other basic services, and social discrimination. Hence, a high rate of poverty impairs our nation's economic progress. As a matter of fact, when a large number of people cannot afford to purchase goods and services, that is when economic growth is more difficult to achieve. It will then cause and lead the people to corrupt, bribe, lack of education, parental issues, and more. Yes, the essence of humans is being able to produce and reproduce. However, we should also take into consideration our current status and our future generations. We should think wisely and practically in this modern world. Third is more consumption of resources such as land, food, water, air, fossil fuels, minerals, which results to more waste products. It is no secret that the world faces serious environmental concerns from natural resources. While the causes are complex, one significant contributor to the problem is the continuing growth of population. More people require more resources, which means that as the population increases, the Earth's resource depletes more rapidly. As we all know, the number of products we consume is also the number of waste we give up. So, how can we alleviate these effects? While the interconnected problems of population growth and environmental issues seem overwhelming, it is important to remember that humans can make changes that positively impact the planet. One good starting point is understanding and applying the concept of sustainability, which is the opposite of resource depletion. Also, providing the developing countries the access to internal markets is a one to relieve population pressure and promote development. Future work can study the effects of other forms of globalization, like foreign directing, investment, and migration. So before we end our presentation, I will share a short video about our topic. This will also serve as the summary of the lesson we discussed.
Hello, my students. It's good to see you once again. I hope you are all doing great as we come into another lesson that has something to do with our population.
Living in this world surrounded by amazing things and unexpected moments, you might have already experienced being asked by a child about why do couples have children? That curiosity would be quite awkward to answer, isn't it? But I am sure it made you stop and think about how you could possibly respond to it without painting unnecessary thoughts to the mind of the children. In a similar perspective, demographic learners also figure out why developing countries have a higher population growth compared to countries already developed.
For today's video, we will expand your understanding about the structure of the human population and the drivers of its growth through our topic today, the global demography. To better understand demography, let us first define statistics.
Statistics is the science of collecting, organizing, presenting, analyzing, and interpreting numerical data to assist in making more effective decisions. If you could remember, there are times members of some statistical organizations come into our homes to collect numerical data, such as the numbers of people living per household. After processing the gathered data, it will further undergo a study or simply called demography. Demography is the study of statistics such as birth, death, income, incidence of disease, which illustrates the changing structure of the human population.
Since there are some causes that modify the world's population over time, it is imperative to say that the rate of the human population is constant. So, what are the drivers of population growth?
Urbanization. People from rural areas move to the urban for the desire of the advantages that urban has to offer. Urban advantages include greater opportunities to receive education, healthcare, and advancement in careers such as better job opportunities. Migration. Migration is the movement of people from one place to another. This movement changes the population of a place. Immigrants add to the total population and emigrants are subtracted from the total population. Immigration and emigration? Aren't they just similar? Wait, let us have a simple grammar lesson. You might be confused about the difference between the two since we commonly use them interchangeably. Well, Immigration and emigration are both called migration. However, the two are somehow different from one another. If you are referring to coming into another country to live there, you will use the term immigration. But if you are to leave your own country to live into another, you will use the term emigration.
The drivers of population growth situate the previous questions that we have asked from the beginning of our lesson. People produce children to simply build a family. Just as in demography, it serves as a contributor that drives growth to the structure of the human population. That is all for now, my dear students. I am Mrs. Gloria P. Balimbin, asking you to please like, subscribe.
That concludes our report about global demography. Thank you.